Hey, Frank in Denver. This is Dave. I'm dealing with a massive rainstorm that's making the Starlink connection here at the farm dubious. So, can you hear me first of all?
A-okay.
Yep.
All right. Um, Listen, it's so great to just say hello to everybody and check in. I have been, as Denver pointed out at the beginning, I've been bouncing around. Actually, the world the last several days. 2 nights ago, I was in Calgary at the United Conservative Party meeting where, if you haven't seen that online, it's on my X account. The guys at TruthStream and Frank shared it as well. So thanks both of you guys for getting it out there. But the United Conservative Party of Canada had a program called Injection of Truth, where I was sharing a number of kind of new material focused largely for a Canadian audience. But if you haven't had a look at that, you might want to have a look. But what I wanted to do briefly, because I'm not going to be able to stay on for the whole of this program, but what I wanted to do was share a very high level just observation, which was that there are a number of people who have struggled over the last certainly 5 years with trying to wrap their head around what I would refer to as the packaging, if you will, or the credentialing of either themselves or how they view others, including how people view me. And I think that it's helpful to realize that part of the motivation for the 12 Senses program is to recognize that we're on our way in every venture that we do. We're on our way to really getting to the 12th cranial nerve. And I just want to kind of highlight the what I mean by that, because at the integration of what ultimately becomes what I refer to as the 12th cranial nerve, or the sense of enunciation, it is the capacity to say I am without following that by any noun or adjective. The ability to just declare your place in society, your place on earth, your place in a universal sense. And probably of all of the tools that I have seen, the one thing that we have not had in a social framework, really in any environment, in any of our lifetimes, is anything that encourages the ability to actually simply have the sense of enunciation, the ability to say, I am, and then have that followed by the evidence of our fully sensory filled life. The reason why I want all the 12 senses exposed to the public and exposed to obviously all of you on this call is because as we activate all of these 12 dimensions of perception, and as we start synthesizing them, what we find is that we don't live a life where we are waiting for an external world to try to inform how we process every single one of our actions and our thoughts. And what I find when people go through the 12 senses program is one of the greatest takeaways all in is that we have the high probability, as we move through getting all of our senses switched on, is we actually cannot live in fear. That's one of the greatest values, the greatest anecdotal and practical realities of getting all of your 12 senses switched on. Because what you find out is once you start having the power of perception, which is something that we don't have to go back very far into history to find evidence of in a lot of communities, and I would go as far as to say in most of the communities that the classic nomenclature describes indigenous, or terms I like to use called communities of persistence. These are communities that have been going on for, in many cases, tens of thousands of years in typically remote areas. These communities have all 12 of their senses working. They have the ability to intuitively communicate with nature. They have the ability to pick up signals that the classic person cannot even begin or can't even fathom to even understand as signals. I used the example in this last workshop of the navigators that can cross thousands of miles of open ocean in just open canoes in the Pacific and be precise on their point of departure and on their destination. And they can do things like hearing and seeing and perceiving and sensing little things like microcurrents in the water. They get to sense micro wind shifts. They get to sense the percussion of what happens on the side of the boat with salinity density changes in the water. They sense the entire world, and as such, they can go from tiny island to tiny island, and they can get there with precision, with timing. They can do so where they know they're not going to be overwhelmed with storms, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. And what I've said to many people is the fully functioning 12 senses humanity still exists. I've had the great fortune in my life of actually living with them. So part of the work that I've done in the 12 senses program is used my neural anatomy training, used my life training, used my sensory faculties all the way around to come up with, when I say 12 senses and when I put the terminology around those 12 senses, what I've done is I've actually looked very closely at what these communities of persistence manifest on a regular basis and say, if humans walking the planet today have the capacity to function fully with all 12 senses, and they are able to do so where they have an active social memory of, in the case of many of the places I've lived in Papua New Guinea, many times they'll report memories of 40,000 years of continuous history. If that is possible in 2025, then I feel very strongly that we as humanity need to both have the humility of understanding that in our march toward what we call a technologically superior point of view, we have deadened our sensory capacity to what I refer to when I teach the course as no more than 2.7 of the 12 senses that we actually have native with our capabilities. And the reason why I say that if we have them all firing, we will be in a position where we cannot be operating and living in fear is because as we become aware that we have intelligences that live within us and we have intelligences that allow us to sense the world around us, what we can find is a rapid way to detect the actual ecosystem in which we're operating and understand how we can navigate that ecosystem. So much like the trackers of the 19th century, who would go out and feel the ground, and they would listen to the wind, and they would get patterns in the movement of birds, and they would do all the things that would sense the entirety of the universe. Much like the trackers of the 19th century, I'm just encouraging us to all open up our aperture of awareness to say there's a possibility that maybe if we tune back into the faculties that we do in fact all have, every one of us has them. So there's nothing about David Martin and my perspective that is particularly unique. What makes it perceptively unique is simply the fact that when it comes to using all of my senses, all 12 nerves, and therefore the activation of all of my brain, I happen to be able to be highly effective at synthesizing an enormous amount of information, which is the reason why a lot of people think somehow there's an intellectual advantage. And that's not the case. The case is a sensory advantage. And that's what I try to share in this program. So hopefully that helps put a little context into the what motivates this particular program.
Well, I think that does a fantastic job because I think a lot of people really do question how you do what you do, right? And especially as you're becoming, ironically, you are already well known for a lot of the economic stuff that you did with the CNN and that type of stuff, and your and how you track markets. But it seems like, when the world kind of went into chaos with this bioweapon development of, what we call COVID, is when people really started, becoming like coming known to your work. And, and it's, and I think that's why, you've done so many amazing interviews too, that have gone into your history. And there's one that he recently did, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, from Australia, where David goes into a lot of his background, like upbringing and history and stuff. And
Yeah,
that's a
that's
really
with
fascinating one.
Senator Malcolm Roberts. So if you go on my X account, you can see that interview on with Senator Malcolm Roberts, and he spent about an hour going into the kind of life history of how I landed in the world that I'm in right now. So it's all there. It's a long interview. It's 3 hours, but I would say if you want to understand a little more of the how the effect came into being, that's probably the best place to see it.
Well, and it's also, when people start understanding too that your first like congressional hearing, I think that you testified in, I think was what, 1983.
That's correct.
And so, and also, I just wanted to point out to people that in the Nest and also in the Purple Pill, David posted the Future Dreaming documentary that I think was that 2015? Was that
Yes.
that done?
Yep.
Okay.
2015.
Yep. And also, that was where he met his lovely wife Kim, whose birthday just happens to be the same day that I ended up skiing into the tree, which is February 2nd, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, there you go.
And so one of the things that that I'd like to do is go through go a little bit more in depth into some of the cranial nerves,
Hey, Denver.
because yeah, go
Denver.
ahead.
Before you do that, and before I have to sign off, I just noticed I just went through a bunch of the comments. Several people have asked about whether or not the text that you read would be available. And I know that Frank has put up a couple pictures of pages um, that have been in a couple of his posts. But if you want to, Frank, if you want to just photograph those first whatever it is, the document that Denver just read.
Correct.
If you want to just photograph whatever it is, let's do like the first 4 pages, so that the people who are asking for the ability to go back and read it can do so. I'm happy to do that. So if you want to just snag those pictures, and that way, the people who are putting up comments saying that they'd like to have the ability to read it, they're welcome to do that.
Okay. Thank you. We'll do that.
Yeah, and thank you for that as well. And I didn't want to do that without permission.
Yeah, no,
So
no. I just saw that there are a few people in the group that have been asking for that. So I'd be happy if Frank, if you can pop that up.
and and also, just for people to know that you know Dr. Martin is looking at doing another 12 senses workshop, possibly in July. I don't think they figured out the date of when they're going to do it yet, but I just wanted to put that out there so people to put that in people's radar.
Yeah, yeah. We're working on nailing down the time for that.
Yep. And so and the and if is it okay if I go into the olfactory nerve, because that's a kicker, man.
Yeah, well, go ahead and dive in. And like I said, I mean, I'm going to have to jump here because I've got a big upcoming hearing that I'm doing tomorrow where I have to give testimony for the National Citizens Inquiry in Canada. So I'm going to have to jump off. Before I do, Denver, I don't know if you want, but if you want, we could just see if there's any immediate questions before I jump off. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to raise your hand and ask a question while we have David here, like I know Susie had her hand raised, so I just added her as a speaker. And so
Yeah, I've
Susie,
just
did
got
you?
a few minutes before I jump. So if anybody wants to do a quick chat, we can do that, and then I have to jump off.
Okay, appreciate it. So Susie, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Oh, hey, Denver, Dr. Martin. Um, Not yet. I wanted to be speaker just in case a question came up because I know I will have one. So I don't want to, I don't want to hold it up, but this is fascinating and I absolutely love the topic and am so excited to be learning whatever you guys have to share. It's still a little overwhelming and I'm a little bit confused about all of it, but I know I'll listen to the recording again and it'll all sink in. But
Oh,
thank you for asking.
yeah, absolutely. And and it's and Dr. Martin is, is there anything that we can do to help you with your mission and what's going on with everything? Because I know that you're doing the stuff in Canada. I know that there's a lot of work that's going on, and I think that people are also interested to know what the progress that you might be having or some of the pitfalls in terms of um, potential prosecution or some of the attorney generals, because I know that there seemed to be a little bit of movement in Oklahoma.
Well, let's stay focused on 12 senses, and then we can do a follow up space, maybe down the road to talk about those other things.
Okay.
Just because I don't want to pull this away from the topic that you've got. So let's take a couple of questions if there are any, and then I'll jump. And then if we want to, obviously Shaq and I have done a couple spaces before, and Frank and obviously Denver. I'd be happy to do a follow up one on some of this stuff. I know the NCI, the National Citizens Inquiry, is going to be a public thing tomorrow. So I'm supposed to be on there at noon tomorrow, Eastern. And if anybody wants to jump on, we can do that too. But I'll just stay on for a couple questions if there are any. If I don't see any hands up, I'll just jump off.
Okay. And we had Kindness come up to the stage. So Kindness, did you have a question that you wanted to ask David about the 12 senses?
Yes, thank you. Hi, this is Marcia. David, I've met you a time or two through Frank and up at Yuba City. Thank you for all you do. I have a question. It may be off topic, but what sense is my tinnitus coming from? What nerve is that? What is that?
So tinnitus can be a lot of things. So it's not necessarily a singular causal thing. What we do know is that one of the places where it can come from is the eighth cranial nerve, which is the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is the nerve that really does innervate much of what we think of as the acoustic and then inner ear functions. However, it's not at all uncommon that sometimes that also can be caused by a variety of environmental toxins as well as pressure in various parts of your cerebral spinal fluid or in your brain. One of the things that you might want to think about is just looking at some very simple balance exercises. One of the things that I've done with a number of people is one-legged postures where you spend at least 20 to 30 seconds with one leg and then alter to another leg. And what you'll find is that working and exercising that very simple function of increasing your acuity around balance can sometimes not necessarily get rid of, but it can in many instances reduce the amount of tinnitus that some people have if the problem is something which is typically associated with the eighth cranial nerve. If it's not, could be all kinds of things. So, not entirely off topic, but until you kind of start doing some ruling things out, it's hard to tell what exactly is the responsible agent for that problem.
I'll start with that. Thank you
Yeah.
very, very much.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I every morning in the gym when I'm home and if I'm traveling, I try to do this as well. I do at least 5 reps of 10, you know, either bicep curls or weights standing on one leg, and then I do exactly the same set standing on the opposite leg. And I just go back and forth for at least 5 sets because after a fairly significant car accident, I had tinnitus after that accident. And what I find is that I probably get 3 to 5 hours of relief of tinnitus by doing that. So that's what I do.
I'm on it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'll keep you up
absolutely.
with that. Okay. Bye
Awesome.
bye. Have
All
fun.
right.
Well, and Dr. Martin, do you feel that the vibration boards also help with that with
I
the
do that. I do all of my weights for my upper body work. I always do on a power plate. So I always do that.
fantastic. And so,
Yeah.
and I have a question for you, and this actually came about from a discussion that I was having with Shay, who attended the 12 Senses course with me. And she asked me a question about sight because she noticed that her eyes were getting lighter in color. And I did a little bit of research with it, and I was curious if, and I guess I'm postulating that, as we're born as children, our eyes, are lighter in color. And as we, and I think around 3 is kind of when you get solidified in what your eye color is going to be, but also they can get a little bit darker with more melanin. But as you get older, the melanin begins to break down, and I'm kind of postulating, what if that possibility is that you're working within yourself and getting closer to your I am, so that you have more light coming from within you, which is actually breaking down the melanin, which is giving you a lighter eye color. So my question is there a possibility that the optic nerve might actually also be efferent as well?
So the matter you're describing actually is something I wrote an essay on, and I will forward it to you, which is an essay I did on how eye color and specifically what happens around your pupil certainly serves as a modifier of the incident optical feed that comes into your eye. It does not have that efferent property, but I do have an essay that I wrote on that, which I'll share with you. So I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely looking forward to it. Because I
Yeah.
mean, would that be related to central heterochromia?
Yeah. Well, it certainly will in terms of the effect that I write about. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
All right.
And would you
So
and would you
so I'm gonna go ahead and jump everybody. It's awesome to spend time with you, Frank. Thanks for posting the pages of the workbook, and I will jump because I've got to get everything ready for tomorrow. But between now and then, thank you all for jumping on. It's awesome to see you here.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you, David.
is it okay if I share that article?